kind of like a, I think people like Michael Jordan as kind of a unique kind of character.
And I have
You just see how games and possessions are more intense, how they mean more.
I'm not putting him on.
I think the U.S. is going to all of a sudden win.
Hello and welcome to Nothing But Respect. I am the missing ball handler, open spot-up jumper, shooter, and good post-pass entry guard that the Sixers need. I am joined by staff writer at Defector, Patrick Redford, and a very special guest. We are joined by the co-host of the You Know Ball podcast, and what I would say is a true, to borrow the Telian turn of phrase, a true 0-1 poster in at TrillBroDude. And what I mean by that, and we actually will get into a lot of this, is a lot of people on the internet are having fun kind of regurgitating various joke frameworks that already exist, right? And that's fun. I do it. I am one of those people. There are very few people who are creating frameworks. And I would say the great TrillBroDude has created a few. So that is like in the Posters Hall of Fame.
Wow.
That is quite the badge of honor. So Trill, thank you for joining the show.
I'm so happy to be living within the context of what came before me and creating a new world online. But no, thanks for having me. I do appreciate that. I feel like I definitely have an old poster soul. I've been on the internet for, 20 years now. Really started with the Sixers Twitter stuff probably about 8 years ago at this point. But I'm glad to be here as representative for this shit show of a season as I'm making the rounds, sitting in the cuck chair every time I go on a new podcast, and I can just talk about how terrible the Sixers are. So this should be fun.
My first question is, I watched the Pistons play recently, and I thought, a veteran leader at the wings, someone like Tobias Harris could be exactly the player the Sixers need. Like, surely you've had this thought before.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think that's a good thought, but I think just to be safe, we should probably give him $180 million.
Just to retain him, yeah.
Just so we can keep him, make the contract undesirable to other teams so they don't want to trade for him, and then make sure that he is a Sixer for life so that you couldn't risk losing a culture guy, a guy who can handle the ball, who can shoot, who can step up in big moments famously, and is someone that really will just be the glue to keep this team together because they desperately need it right now.
I mean, the obviously funniest possible scenario in all of this, getting ahead of this, is if it turned out that Tobias Harris was what was keeping the team together. Like, that actually is true.
Not Joel Embiid's meniscus at all. Nothing to do with Joel Embiid's knee completely falling apart. Everything to do with Tobias Harris being friends with Tyrese Maxey. And I unironically do think that the team could use like a guy that is in the ilk of Tobias as like a locker room guy, but also someone preferably who isn't making $180 million and, being the 73rd best player in the NBA or what. I don't even know where he's at now. I tried to tell people, like, I would say I was probably closer to the Tobias defending spectrum for the first few years of the contract. And then the last two, I was like, yeah, I mean, he's a $15 million a year player making $40 million. There's really nothing you could do to defend that, but it would be a hilarious outcome if the Pistons now turn into the Sixers, and they're the team that gets to win 50 games and make it to the second round of the playoffs every year.
Yeah, he's kind of, yeah. What you really needed was Kemp Bazemore. What you got was Tobias Harris.
Exactly. I would love to just have one nice locker room guy that the coach would not play. Like, right. Now we have, I mean, it's hard to say now because Lowry only makes the vet minimum, but Lowry's kind of the guy that awesome locker room guy. Everyone loves him, kind of like a coach on the floor, but I would prefer that he would be a coach on the bench because he's almost 40 years old and he literally can't jump or run anymore. And I feel like those are two skills that are kind of important when you're playing professional basketball.
Other than like having the use of his limbs, he's so good. So
exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Exactly. You can't pay for that veteran presence,
All right. I want to back up a little bit. talk about some Trill lore, because as a like you said, as a person on the internet, information comes out about you in kind of drips and drabs. One funny thing is that you and I both have a strange Cumtown extended universe into basketball podcasting career arc, which is like probably one of the actually less surprising post Cumtown arcs if we're talking about Stav Alkius being like the next Bernie Sanders. But what were you doing with Cumtown that you've tweeted about it various times?
I was gonna say, I didn't know if I had tweeted about it or if I had I've talked about it on stream and maybe on the podcast before, but I don't really know those guys. Like, I don't have like any sort of like formal connection to them. But when I was in my mid to early 20s, I worked at a comedy club in New York City called Caroline's on Broadway. And
iconic.
Yeah, and we did the New York Comedy Festival every year. And so my boss would ask me, what are like the upcoming hot comedians and podcasts and stuff like that that you would want to book at the club? So I would help him book some niche things that he had never heard of before, because he was, mainly focused on the stand-up guys that were up and coming. He was, Mark Normand and Sam Morrill and the guys who were like famous now but were just club comics at the time. So I had said, I know this podcast. At the time, I knew I was listening to Chapo, and I was like, and their friends have a pod, because I didn't book Chapo's first gig. I booked their second gig because they did a gig on election night at the Genius headquarters, which was famous for
crazy sentence.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very 2016 sentence I just said there. But I booked their second live show ever, and we had them at the club a few times, but we booked Cumtown when they were literally like, they had no cultural cachet. Like, they were just a podcast of three guys that lived in Brooklyn. I literally think they had just started their Patreon. Right. It was that early in the Cumtown days. And of course my boss was like, their podcast is called Cumtown. Like, what are we going to do for advertising purposes? Like, we got to put it on a poster that's out on Broadway and I got to put it up on our website that gets a ton of traffic. And they're like, they're going to think we're hosting like a porn convention at the club. Like, so we book the show, we book it like a month out. And I post everything, and I just edit out the U and the M, and so it just says C-Town with asterisks on the poster, on the website, all this stuff. And I put it out there. I put it in our email that we go out every week. I post it on all our social media. And I can't remember if it was Stav or Adam, but one of them because I only knew Nick Mullen at the time. I didn't even know Stav and Adam. And one of them tweeted it, and they were like, well, we were thinking about changing the name, but now this is everywhere for our first live show. So we kind of have to keep the name now. And in a way, that is, real butterfly effect, Oppenheimer moment.
Yeah.
Where they then go on to be one of the biggest. At the time, I don't think that really anything thought anything of it, but now they go on to be one of the biggest comedy podcasts of all time and have this iconic name. And they almost changed it early. I don't know if they would have gotten that big if they went with another name. So I'm taking at least a little bit of credit for jumping the gun there and putting it everywhere.
That's like the first domino in that meme where the last one is like, the United States elects its first Greek American president in 2036.
Yeah.
I put Cumtown on a poster that's out on 48th and Broadway, in the center of Times Square.
And so, when do you turn to what we're kind of having you on here to be like a voice of Sixers Twitter? Have you always been a big basketball fan and poster, and so it just sort of connected? Did you have a kind of like radicalizing moment?
Sure. Yeah, no, I grew up a huge Sixers fan. I grew up if anyone's familiar with the area, I grew up just outside Chestnut Hill, which is a part of the city, and in a small town called Flowertown. And basically growing up, I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit before, just a little bit of lore about me and my family. My dad is like, not like Alex Jones conspiracy theorist, I want to get this out there, but my dad is like very untrustworthy of the government. So we didn't have the cable or the internet when I was growing up until I was like probably 15 or 16. And I'm 34 now. So this was like when everyone had it in 2005, 2006. Like that's when when I was growing up, I was a huge Sixers fan just from going to the games with my dad and watching whatever random national games we could get. And then I would listen to the games on the radio.
Oh, cool.
Because I didn't have the ability to watch it on cable unless I was at a family member's house or whatever, and we could turn the game on. And yeah, so the first time that I ever really got into the Sixers was obviously I was like 11 years old when they made the NBA Finals with the Iverson run. And I became a huge fan, but it was a little bit challenging to, follow the team when you're literally just reading like newspaper articles and watching whatever you can. Like I would be at school on the laptops watching like whatever clips existed on the internet back then that I could watch, and then listening to the games on the radio. And then, yeah, as I got older, I don't really think there was ever a time that I lost track. Like I wasn't like at least an upper end of casual fan, I would say. I always stuck with the team. But when I moved to New York, which was about 2014, which was around the time of the process, that was probably the time I was the most disconnected from the team in general, which is funny because most people got really into the team during that time. And then I got back into it around 2016. I moved back to Philly. And then ever since, yeah, I started my Twitter account. I've always had like somewhat of an internet presence. Like I was like a smallish account in Philly Twitter at the time. And I would post about the Sixers sometimes, but it really was like 2018, 2019, and then into COVID when my account started popping off. This is like my third Twitter account I've had because actually, funny story, the last Twitter account I got actually got removed because I was making these Sixers playoff hype videos and putting Cut to the Feeling by Carly Rae Jepsen as the song, and it got DMCA'd so many times on Twitter because they used to care about that.
Yeah.
So it got DMCA'd so many times that my Twitter account got taken down, and I had to create this new one, which I started at the beginning of COVID, and then I started my podcast about 6 months after that, and then here we are. So
I'm dying at the idea of you like on LimeWire trying to download regular season Sixers games.
Taking 3 hours to get like an Andre Iguodala like 12 points on 5 of 21 shooting clip.
Do you guys remember NBADraft.net back in the day?
Yeah.
Like I used to live, like how people live on Tankathon now. I was on NBADraft.net that whole cycle for the Iguodala draft because we had the 9th pick in the draft. And Iguodala was my guy because he had insane dunks, steals, and blocks in college. And I was like, I didn't know anything. I was 14. And I was like, this guy's got a sick highlight tape on NBADraft.net. And he was on Arizona, which was a good team. Like, he was my guy. I was like, I want the Sixers to get him at 9. And that was the first time. Well, actually, the year before was the first time that I had displayed any sort of ball knowledge. I went to school and I printed, because my uncle was a big Darko Milicic guy. He was like, no, this guy's going to be the next Dirk Nowitzki. He still to this day will say to me when I see him, like, that's when I knew I had to hang it up for draft stuff. When you told me Darko Milicic was going to be a bust, I went to school and I went on NBADraft.net and I printed out his stats. And I was 13 years old and I brought it to my uncle and I was like, this guy fucking sucks. Like, he averages 2 points a game. I was like a calculator rat when I was 13. I didn't even realize it. And I was like, you should definitely draft Carmelo Anthony over him. It makes no sense because I watched him in the tournament and he has aura and he's a bucket and a problem. And turned out to be right about that one. So those were the two early things. I'm sure I had plenty of misses because I used to love small little bucket getting guards. Like, obviously I was Iverson, Lou Williams. Like, there was a lineage of Sixers guys that kind of fell in line there. So yeah, that was early internet days of ball knowledge.
That's awesome.
My big miss there is I thought Jared Bayless was going to be like a 10-time All-Star.
I like Jared Bayless in the draft too, if I remember correctly. If I remember, he was always one of those guys, kind of like in like the Cam Reddish mold, where it's always like, you just got to get to the right opportunity, get him in the right place. And then it never worked out. Sometimes that happens though, where guys take 4 or 5 years, and I'm always like trashing them on the podcast. And now RJ Barrett is averaging like 24, 6 and
so
6.
Good.
And I'm like, wait, where did this come from? Like I literally have stats every year saying that when he's off the court that like the Knicks are unstoppably good. And then when he plays, they're kind of mid. And now he's got to a new situation. So sometimes it really is just context. And then sometimes it is Jared Bayless syndrome where he's just a guy.
I think it was Jared Bayless. I don't want to get this wrong, but I'm going to just say it because it's funny if it's true. I have some friends who used to scrimmage with like around Lewis and Clark. So they would scrimmage with like Dame and his kind of friends who would play around there, and one of them was like the best one-on-one player I have ever seen play basketball is Jared Bayless, but just kept being like he was in the wrong situation, he could never get it right.
Wow.
But he was the best one-on-one,
He was a bucket.
Yeah, so
Authentically.
never mind. I was going to talk about Pat O'Brien, the Warriors center who was drafted and then sent to the Santa Cruz, whatever the fuck's Bakersfield Jam. I mean, okay, Trill. One of the reasons we wanted to have you on is because I have a theory that you kind of like tie into, and you are a good person to talk about this with. And the theory is essentially that the kind of Freudian id of NBA fandom, or like online NBA fandom, resides in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I have some theories about why. My cousin has posited it's because they put lead in the water.
Definitely possible.
There's a few possible reasons. I want to outline my case really quickly, and then Patrick, give me a little other color, and then Trill, I want you to respond. It is basically that the process came in this moment of social media, like jumping the shark in terms of online fandom, and this thing that we didn't realize was happening at the time, but now see, which is that the fluff around the game and the sort of ancillary content has, to a certain group of people, become more important than what actually happens in a regular season game. Some of this stuff that this is sort of not new, but we didn't know it had started at that time, whatever. And all of that started with the process, which was this really bizarre strategy that everybody knows about tanking, but it aligned perfectly as people were primed to be thinking about the stuff around the game, and then here's this major media team going on this crazy strategy that they're punting regular season games and inviting all this drama around it, whatever. And that kind of fused. It basically made Philly fans the center or the new frontier of this fandom, because their team was having all the crazy off the field court stuff happen to them, and they were shitty, which always makes a fan base more funny. And so that birthed this tradition of insane fandom online in Philadelphia.
I think it is kind of the perfect storm for sure, yeah. Especially because Philly fans. It was very funny. I was talking with my girlfriend and her sister who are not into sports, and they were basically saying it is just on a different. I've always said it's Northeast Philly, sports fans in general, like New York, Boston, Philly, are another level of psychotic. But I lived in New York, and New York is so large that you can escape that world entirely. In Philadelphia, you can't. Like, everyone is into sports, or everyone in your family is into sports, or it's unavoidable. Like, the city is basically like we always call it like a big small town. And I had a buddy who years ago said that he's not online anymore, but at the time my buddy Matt had posted that the process and everything that has happened since is an MK Ultra style experiment to see how insane you can drive a fan base before they finally break. And this wasn't even like before. This was probably 4 years ago. This was probably during the 2019-2020 season when they were having kind of a weird year before Joel Embiid's leap into MVP and, all that stuff. But since then, there's been even more weird stuff with Ben Simmons and James Harden and, obviously Joel Embiid's most recent injury. But I definitely do agree with you to an extent that I think it is kind of the perfect storm with, the fact that they were intentionally losing. By the way, the big market part of it is the most important thing, though, because this has been done forever, and it drives me insane. And Raptors fans tend to do this the most, I would say, where it's like, well, tanking doesn't work. Like, look at the teams that win championships. They don't tank. And it's like, well, you have to have someone tank for you at a minimum. Like, the Celtics are about to be potentially a dynasty built on the back of the Nets being terrible and them owning their picks. Like, there is virtually no way to succeed and build a championship level team without getting at least incredibly lucky in the draft or towards the top of the draft, nailing a few picks. Now, there might be some recent exceptions like the Raptors, who I think were the first team that ever had a title without a single lottery pick in their group. But historically speaking, these things have always happened. It's just the fact that Philadelphia was so shameless, the Sixers were so shameless about the fact that they were doing it in a big market, a big moneymaker for the league. Like, Sam Presti did it in OKC, but no one gave a shit because they had just left Seattle. So they were at like their lowest point, and they did it for 3 straight years. They got 3 straight MVPs. They made the NBA finals. They probably would have won multiple finals if they had kept that core together. But due to the fact that, they were able to do it in a smaller market when no one really cared about the team, they were just excited to have a team in OKC. It was viewed a little bit differently by the NBA world in general and the media. And Sixers fans, I think we were at the time especially, were just so sick of the same mediocre teams over and over and over and over and over again that we were willing to try anything. And I think, like I said, a lot of people got into it during the process years because it was the first time that it felt like there was any sort of upside for the future, because we had been, since Iverson and that run in 2001, we had 13 years of like, I think we won 2 playoff series in 13 years. We were always like one of the lower seeds, more competitive, but there was really never any chance for them to even throw their hat into the championship conversation. So it was one of those things where, like you said, I think it was a perfect storm, and it made all of us genuinely insane and definitely the center of a lot of discussion over the past decade.
Yeah, the thing that was special about the process was not like the losing, it was that it was a branding exercise. Like, and like you said, teams tank all the time. Like, there's like kind of some teams tanking now, and it's like sort of out of the meta a little bit, but it's like, as long as like Cooper Flagg is the number 1 pick in the draft and whatever, like the draft is how you build, there'll always be tanking. The difference was Sam Hinkie saying like, you get to be part of this too. Like, yes, We're going to win. They won 10 games that one year, right? Like, yes, we're going to lose 72 games, but like, you see that there's the vision of this. And it was always a sort of like creating his own cargo cult thing where it's like, the point is not to lose in the second round of the playoffs. The point is to win a championship. Like, it was always about this very defined endpoint. And I saw like with the Fultz and the Simmons trades, people declaring the process dead or whatever. And like, as long as Joel Embiid draws breath, you cannot really regard the process as a success or failure, because it's like this larger end game point. Like you said, like I was looking up their basketball reference, and like having guys who are a collective 9,000 years old, like Larry Brown and Doug Collins, leading you to like 2 playoff series wins in 20 years. Like, that's the kind of shit that would make you want to like burn things to the ground for, a couple seasons. And like, I think even judging it as a success or failure in basketball terms is sort of the wrong way to go. Like, the MK Ultra thing, I think, is like the way to think about it. And It's totally a success on that front.
Exactly. And in even the Doug Collins year, like Derrick Rose tore his ACL in that series, and like they were the 8th
Evan
seed.
Turner was on that team, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, I only know this because I've revisited this a ton. They were probably more competitive than your average 8 seed. They had like a really good net rating that year. Their defense was incredible. Because keep in mind, they had Drew, they had Iggy, they had all. They basically were just missing that superstar level player on that team. If you were able to, I always think about the 2010 draft and that being the turning point for the Sixers, because if they had just drafted one of Boogie Cousins, Gordon Hayward, Paul George, instead of Evan Turner in that draft, which, by the way, some of that is complete retrospect hindsight bias. No one was ever talking about Paul George going at the top of that draft. Hayward and Cousins, maybe, but you're talking about a team that would at least be on the level of they can win a playoff series without this extraordinary luck happening to them, and with the Rose injury. And the thing that Sixers fans just wanted was like a core that could compete and regularly win playoff series, win 50 games every year, and then if it, like you said, like the idea that it could lead to a championship, because if you look at the top of the draft at that time, the top of the draft was quote-unquote the marketed efficiency, but also, funny enough, in those few years, Jokic got drafted in the second round, Giannis got drafted outside the lottery, Kawhi Leonard got drafted outside the lottery. Like, it was a weird it is a weird thing, because Hinkie definitely correctly identified the fact that if you just got a ton of draft picks and made a ton of picks, like they drafted and got the assets to build a championship level team into that 2018-2019 team with Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, JJ Redick.
Horford?
This was before Al Horford.
Oh, Horford's the next one.
He was the missing piece.
The problem that the Sixers had is that they shuffled the team, the roster, so many fucking times. They never had any continuity. They had like ADHD. They just got bored, and they were like, let's just bring in this new crew and this new crew and this new crew. And history actually tells you, if you want to win championships, you have to have a core team together for multiple years in order to reach that, and basically hope that you get lucky enough that one year you can finally break through. And the Sixers just got impatient way too many times and flipped the roster over and over and over again, and then they ended up in the situation that they're in now.
Two thoughts. One, we've seen Gordon Hayward's political journey, because in part possibly, Butler to Utah, kind of education reform. If he gets drafted to Philly, his shit is like no iPhone 5G makes you fucking have cancer. Like, he's like, no, like I'm not going anywhere where Verizon has a stronghold.
Yeah, if we know anything about Pennsylvania, it's actually it's funny, because probably 10 years ago, around that time, you would have considered Pennsylvania a more liberal place, but everyone here, just like the rest of the country, has gone collectively insane. Right. So there really is no defining, political overarching ideology of the entire area. We've all just been broken by the internet. And I'm sure Gordon Hayward would have went down the same pipeline just a lot faster.
Right. The second thing is, Patrick, what you said about the branding exercise, and specifically about the opening the tent to the fans to become part of the process, is so astute and correct, and also was another one of those things that seemingly foreshadowed the way fandom was going to go. This is like a bizarre line I'm drawing here, but it kind of makes me think of like Mr. Beast and Kai Cenat and like these people who are like, come be a part of my subscribers and come like spam other people's streams, and like, you are part of this. My thing
success is your success.
Yeah, exactly. And how in a much more sort of like skitzed out way, the Sixers, I mean, nobody rides for the process in Sam Hinkie more than Philly fans. Like, they are like, he was wronged, and the process is great, and all of these things. And that, I think that's this like strange tale of the process, the branding exercise of it all.
Yeah, they basically did they cultivated what we would now think of as parasociality before we had like a verbal framework to think of things in those terms. And like fandom is like a weird, like sports fandom where outcomes are definite is like a weird sort of like framework for that. But I think that's absolutely like the waters they were treading in.
No, it's interesting you bring that up, because I literally think the first time I had ever heard the word parasocial was in 2014 during a Bo Burnham special where someone yells out from the crowd and says, "I love you." And he goes, "You don't know me as a person. That's called a parasocial relationship." And that would be around the same time as the process began. So it's really appropriate.
That's awesome. That's actually a good. Or Patrick, wait, were you going to say something?
Well, no, I was just going to say that like I remember like this is sort of my sort of formative basketball Twitter time too. And there was this ambient sense, like I was not a Sixers fan. Like I've only ever I've only, as I was telling you, been to Philly about a month ago for an hour driving out of the airport to the shore.
Which is the best experience that you can
but
have.
I remember everyone was like very passively or even actively like pro this. Like there was a big tanking discourse. Like when Henry Abbott still ran True Hoop, they did this whole series on like how to solve tanking. And so like that was the sort of context in which Hinkie fell out of that particular coconut tree. And so everyone was down with it because they were like, oh, they're like aware. It's like self-aware tanking. And it's funny to think about like how the like newfound parity in the league makes that like context feel totally different, if that makes sense.
No, you're right. I literally was just talking about this the other 10 years ago let's go back to the beginning, the night that the process started, which was the 2013 draft.
It was the holiday trade, right?
The holiday trade, right? Which is funny because the Sixers actually had 2 lottery picks in
you
that.
You guys are insane.
We are.
The
yes.
night the process began.
No, it was the Noel.
This is the rights
trade.
to Ricky Sanchez. This is literally where that
comes
from.
It is true. I can't believe.
Yes, it's
true.
But just to go back to that and touch on that, funny enough, I always talk about the fact that now look, I always make fun of Michael Lombardi, who goes on Bill Simmons' podcast, where he's like, "Yo, the process didn't work because they didn't draft Jokic or Giannis," and then I was like, so you're solving the process would be I would have drafted 2 of the greatest players ever drafted outside of the lottery because I'm built different. No, everyone passed on those guys. It makes it hurt a little bit just because the Sixers passed on Giannis twice, and he is the theoretical kind of upside swing you would want to take when it's a bad draft like 2013 was, and you're aiming for long-term potential, but it's also hindsight bias to say that he would have went with like where they took Nerlens Noel with the 6th pick, because everyone considered Nerlens Noel as the no-brainer kind of number 1 pick leading up to the draft. He has this injury, that doesn't work out for them that year. It works out for them the next year with the Joel Embiid thing, almost the same exact thought process. Right. Mm-hmm. So just going back to that, like, and where it all started. In 2013, if Drew Holiday was on your team, you would be accidentally too good to tank. Now the Jazz can have Lauri Markkanen, who's like an all-star level player and one of the 40 best players in the NBA, and they could still be bad because the rest of the league is so much better. Every single night is a tough game. Whereas if you look at those rosters from 2013 and 2014, like we always joke about, if you take this Portland Trailblazers team and you put them in 2014, they're making the playoffs. Like in the Eastern Conference, they're definitely making the playoffs. Like you look at some of the rosters from that time period, you had to tear things down to the studs in order to get high draft picks. Because if you accidentally had like 1 or 2 competent players back then, you could win 35 games and hurt your draft pick. But nowadays, like you can literally have like many good players and still be a bad team, as the Sixers are learning this year. But my point on this is that the parity and the talent level of the league being so high is that it actually might change the way that teams look at tanking, just because you actually have to be legitimately very good to win games. And now, like a team like the Jazz are probably going to win 20 games, and I think that they have like at least 3 starter level players on their team with Lowry, Sexton, and Walker Kessler, and then John Collins is having a little bit of a resurgent year, and they have 4 wins. So that's just kind of where the league is at compared to where it was 10 years ago.
Do you want to? I just looked up the 2011-2012 Sixers team that beat the Bulls in the first round series.
Yes.
Do you want to guess who their leading scorer was and how many points per game they scored? This disgusted me.
Was it Lavoy Allen?
It was Lou Williams at 14.9 points per game. 2 of their leading 3 scorers came off the bench. Just it's crazy how much the game has changed.
Who was the other leading
years.
Scorer that came off the bench?
Thaddeus Young put up 12.8 and finished 9th in 6th Man of the Year voting.
The only reason I said Lavoy Allen was because I remember Lavoy Allen having like a dominant game against the Celtics, where he like locked up KG and went crazy in the second round. And that guy wouldn't touch an NBA floor nowadays. Like that's just kind of the reality of the league being as deep and talented as it is now.
I love there's like a tired, Jimmy Butler would have averaged 65 points in the 80s. Wired, Shadon Sharp would have averaged 60 points in 2013.
Put him back then. Put Shaden Sharp and Donovan Clingan would break basketball if you put them in the Eastern Conference in 2012.
You're like, oh my God, is that Penny Hardaway and Shaq? Okay, you mentioned earlier this conversation about parasocial stuff, and because another part of this whole thing that I've always thought is almost cosmic and weird is that right around all this process starting, all this stuff, you get the rights to Ricky Sanchez, which is this pod that has turned into this almost movement, right? With that was the first pod to really break through to use the basically new media infrastructure of podcasting with the old media idea of a radio show focused on a specific team and create a team-specific podcast centered around the Sixers, of course, and the Process Sixers. And that is now, not only does every single team have their own, version of that, but there are entire podcast networks built around trying to be the people that sell ads on local podcasts. Like there are many different podcasts on each team. Like it's just incredible how ahead of their time they were. I don't know. What do you remember? Were you an early rights to Ricky Sanchez? Were either of you early rights to Ricky Sanchez?
I had friends that were big into it, but I didn't get into it until I moved back to Philly in like 2016, 2017. Like I had friends who were literally listening from their first podcast back around that draft. If I remember correctly, I think their first podcast was literally the night of the 2013 draft.
That's amazing.
And the reason why it was called the rights to Ricky Sanchez was because the first move that Sam Hinkie ever made was either trading the rights to Ricky Sanchez, waiving him, or I can't remember, but it was something to do with the rights, who is a Puerto Rican basketball player that is just played in the Puerto Rican league. Like he's inconsequential to the NBA, but is representative of what kind of kicked off the process. So I think the reason why, first off, I do understand that like there are a lot of different fan bases, and like you said, like it became a model, but I think that everyone's kind of trying to chase them and what they've built because one, like you said, like the process in itself was like a cult, and they were able to tap into something that was not just about like the actual games being played. Like they were constant year round. They'd talk about the draft. They'd talk about different moves that the teams could make, getting to the salary floor. It's basically the inception of just talking about slop around the clock, which, is something that we've kind of taken to another level on ball, I would say, just in terms of like the slop lexicon in the NBA. But the reason why they were so successful is because Spike had the radio brain, and Spike is really, really good at radio and like crafting a show. And Mike had his fingers on the pulse of Sixers Twitter, NBA Twitter, and he also was like a genuine NBA, what they call sickos now, where he was just like watching every team around the clock. He was obsessed with basketball. And the reason why those two were so good together was because they both understood. They kind of like, Spike came from old media, Mike was new media with the blogging, and it kind of became this perfect marriage of those two together and having completely different opinions on almost everything. And it is kind of like what, became like the mismatch was incredibly popular with Kevin O'Connor and Chris Vernon. And like I said, I think people have been trying to chase it and recreate it ever since, but I'm telling you, as someone who has a Sixers adjacent podcast that does NBA stuff, it's just they're on like another level in terms of connecting with their fans and building like basically an empire of basketball fandom, and like they are like by far the biggest fan podcast, I think. Like, I mean, I can't imagine there are many others. And like, I guess if you would consider like, I guess ones that get signed to like Barstool or whatever might have like more listeners, but I don't really think that anyone has quite the level of connection with their community that the Ricky does. And I think everyone's trying to recreate that because it's like, it's a model that works, and it's a model that, gets people excited about the podcast. And once again, it's an extension of the parasocial thing, where it's like everyone saw them from the beginning, and they built and they grew with them, and they went from like doing their lottery party with like 50 or 100 people to like selling out like 2,000 person venues here in Philly. So yeah, they're on another level of creating, and their community building has been fucking insane, dude. Like I don't even know how, if anyone will ever match that same level that they've been able to over the past decade.
No, it's like a paramilitary group.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say, I think the peak of that was probably back in like 2017 with the retweet Armageddon and how they basically were clowning everyone for who trashed the process when we got Markelle Fultz with the #1 pick.
Swag.
It is kind of funny listening to the podcast now, though, because if you listen to the podcast now, you can tell that there is like they're both still into the team. They both still follow, but you can tell that much like the process, it didn't really go the way that any of us expected it. Mm-hmm. And we're all kind of like grasping at straws, trying to figure out like where it went wrong. There's a million different reasons you could blame it on, but it is funny listening now where like Mike, who at one point was like the more optimistic of the two, is like he's down and out on some episodes, and I think that is really representative of the fan base, and that's probably the thing that they do best. Like they capture how people feel on both sides of arguments in the fan base.
I think that transitions us nicely into like remembering some of sort of like the greatest weird hits of that era, because like the basketball of it and their success or not success is like very interesting, but I think the funnier, like the more notable thing is that like some of the funniest things that have ever happened in the last like 20 or 30 years in the NBA have been directly related to the process. Like I just pulled up the Sam Hinkie letter. Second sentence, he name checks Atul Gawande. On that page, you also see Warren Buffett, Abraham Lincoln's name. As I'm scrolling, I see the words 10,000 year clock, Doha, Qatar.
Amazing.
Tesla's Elon Musk, a subhead, the necessity of innovation. Like the Hinkie letter is my favorite sort of, I don't know if it's forgotten thing, but like there's the Colangelo collar thing. And I guess I just wonder, like, was this like a meaningfully stranger period for a single team, or is this like downstream of the media phenomenonhood of the process?
I think it's the strangest period of any team ever. The thing that no one ever really brings up is that one of our players almost died.
Yes.
Like Zaire Smith is probably he's probably the epicenter of all of where kind of things started to go off the rails a little bit, because you had already drafted Fultz, and obviously that didn't really work out. But like at the time, Ben Simmons was still great. Like Ben was making all-star teams. He was one of the best defenders and passers in the NBA. And then they draft Zaire Smith. First off, they trade Mikal Bridges, whose mom works for the organization, on draft night. Everyone is so happy. And by the way, this is the part of where they started to lose me a little bit with like the team building shit, because the reasoning that came out afterwards was that they were still trying to collect assets to make a superstar trade, because they acquired a Miami Heat first round pick in 2021, which, by the way, went on to get traded in the Paul George trade. It was traded in the Tobias Harris trade, then the Paul George trade. OKC ends up with that pick, of course, and they select Trey Mann, which, he turned out to be pretty inconsequential for them. He's been pretty good on the Hornets, but the reason I bring this up is because the draft night trade of Mikal Bridges, where they send Mikal Bridges to the Suns and they get that extra pick, they take Zaire Smith, was really where things started to go off the rails, because they were not realizing how good their team was. They had just made the playoffs. They won 50 games. They lost to the Celtics in the second round, but they were in pretty much every game except for one game in that series. And they really should have looked at that as, okay, now it's time for us to try to win games and try to become contenders. And they looked at it as, let's take a long-term project guy like Zaire Smith. The more sure thing guy like Mikal Bridges that's probably going to help us right away, we would rather get the extra asset in that first round pick and then try to trade for. A few months later, Jimmy Butler becomes available. They didn't even have to use that pick.
Right.
And and they get Jimmy, and that should have been their mindset. They were star hunting, quote unquote. But Zaire obviously has this horrible peanut allergy thing happen to him where he eats something in our cafeteria. He wasn't aware he had a peanut allergy. He ends up in the hospital. He loses all this weight. He almost dies. And then his career is never the same after that. Whether he would have been an NBA player or not is kind of inconsequential to the whole story. It's just the fact that, like, the Sixers almost had a player die. He was never the same after that. And it's not one of the weirdest things that's happened during this whole process. And once again, I do think that it's like every year there's always something major, whether it's the Ben Simmons trade request, the James Harden trade request, the collar with, Brian Colangelo's burners, the Zaire Smith incident, the draft night trade of Mikal Bridges. The aura and the vibes around the Sixers have been
sex trafficking.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, people always forget about the Uber story. Shout out to Mo Bamba, who had to sit through that. But the aura and the vibes around the team have been so off for so long that a year ago was losing my mind when Daryl Morey was saying, we'll just try to get cap space next summer. Because I'm like, Joel Embiid is a ticking time bomb. What are you? You can go back and listen to podcasts. Like, I was screaming, like, we can't tempt fate anymore. Like, there is going to be negative karma coming in our direction because we just got Tyrese Maxey with the 21st pick in the draft a few years ago, and he became an all-star, and those things don't happen to us. So please just push in the chips and make a team that's worth winning. And then eventually we get Paul George, and I go, well, I guess he proved me wrong, and now we're sitting here and they have 4 wins, and we're 3 weeks away from Christmas. So,
I wanted to say one thing about the team building thing. A funny kind of Patrick, you were talking earlier about like the meta of the day, and I'm thinking back about this 2013-2014 era, which is what we didn't realize at the time was basically the apex of the Big Three era. And I think that the Sixers process, the original idea was like you tank and then you get 3 stars and then you win your championship. But what we were shifting into was more of this era of smart team building, continuity, and depth. And it was almost like, yes, perhaps the process made sense, but then the like what you do with those high draft picks ended up being what went awry, which was they were going, that Zaire Smith pick reminded me of it, of like if you were really on top of the meta, which of course they couldn't have been because it's 2024, I'm looking back on this, but it's obvious that you're taking somebody like Mikal Bridges who can fit and is malleable and basically has the upside of the exact type of championship player you say give 11 draft picks for later if you're the fucking New York Knicks. So it's a strange world. So give me I want to give you a few of these Black Swan moments and give me your Patrick and Joe, give me your top 3. So I got that, and you can feel free to add some because I obviously forgot the peanut allergy thing. We have the Colangelo takeover, which was Brian Colangelo, or who was it? Somebody installed their son, right?
Yeah. So Jerry Colangelo was basically, while Hinkie was still with the team, was installed by the league front office to oversee everything with the Sixers. So that was, what they would call in the politics world regime change. They, put him into the front office and they said, and then basically they get to the point where Hinkie doesn't have as much power as he used to. He resigns, and then shortly after, Brian Colangelo was hired by the Sixers, and then within 2 years, it is discovered that he's talking shit on the players on several burner accounts.
Well, it was his wife, right?
I think she got thrown under the bus, personally.
I actually think I have a sort of convergent but slightly like opposite conspiracy theory here, where I think the people who leaked it to Ben Dietrich, and like it's an all-time blog. Like, my theory doesn't obviate that that's like one of the best, coolest, funniest things ever written, but like, I think basically they knew it was his wife, but like if it is his wife the whole time, that's like still damning and probably still fireable, but less explosive. And I think whoever leaked it knew that it was his wife the whole time, but like tried to make it presented as if it was definitely him, because that's like how it's presented in the story, right?
So I did an episode on this a few years ago on my podcast, and I had on a buddy of mine, Sixers, who goes by Sixers Adam. He's a Sixers writer, and he was one of the first people that went on and found every single tweet from the burners and downloaded all of them. I'll say this much. I would be shocked if it was his wife based on the information that he provided. A lot of people don't know this. I talked about it on the podcast. It blew my mind because I had never heard this before. There's a tweet that is from Brian Colangelo. It almost certainly has to be Brian Colangelo, where he compares the "We the North" slogan that the Raptors had after he left, that Masai Ujiri in the front office had put in after he left, to the Third Reich and Hitler. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that Barb Colangelo did not have that much animosity towards Masai Ujiri and the Toronto Raptors for replacing him. He constantly talked shit on Masai and the Raptors because they made him look bad after he left, basically. And I think there was a lot of personal animosity that was built into a lot of those tweets that if it's coming from his wife really loves him, because it was a lot of personal shit.
Yeah, maybe
and
they
a lot
just
of
have a great
vendettas that he was getting off.
And so I wanted to bring up the Colangelo thing too, because there's a real kind of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden symmetry here. Like, talk about it's a reverse
Hunter Biden innocent. I'm always saying.
Yes.
It's a good day for us. Yeah.
Hunter Biden had some burner tweets in his own right, if you kind of consider like
those videos.
pics,
sure. Yeah. The one with the future highlights on. Someone put some future songs on it.
Colangelo's Fleet Foxes on the iPhone moment of like unintentionally redeeming thing that gets made fun of all the time is the collars. Those were normal collars. They did need to find a new slant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Brian's definitely innocent on that one.
He was ahead of the sort of like baggy pantsification of 2020's fashion. Like, he didn't realize, like, you get Brian Colangelo on throwing fits. He's like, these were Issey Miyake. Yeah, like these were $4,000.
That's a very "my wife dressed me and is defending me" post. I will say, if you wanted to go with the Barb angle, I feel like that could be something like, hey, I bought that for him at Macy's and that's totally a normal collar, so why don't you chill the fuck out?
Okay, so run through the rest of the list. We got signing Tobias Harris for $180 million and kind of the domino effect of not being able to retain Jimmy Butler. We have Markelle Fultz getting the yips. We have Ben Simmons getting the yips, and then we have this current kind of meltdown. Will include the Marcus Hayes sort of fight gate, snitch gate as part of that. So if you had to pick, give me two based on two metrics. If you had to pick the most important to the process, and if you had to pick the funniest, I
would say honestly the most important thing, even through all of the bullshit that we've talked about, is probably the fact that Joel Embiid still had a 99th percentile outcome for his career, despite the fact that he didn't play basketball for 2 years. That never happens. Like, we've had guys sit out their rookie season and come back and be fine. It's never happened in NBA history that you sit out your first 2 years. You have these back, knee, and foot problems that he had in college and his first few years in the NBA. And then you become an MVP level player. Runner-up for MVP 3 different times, or 2 different times, I think. Even with him not making a conference, there is no, level that he could possibly reach that I could have seen happening back in 2014 or 15, whenever he was sitting out, that I feel like does get a little bit under-discussed, is the fact that, like, we probably lived in the best possible timeline for Joel Embiid's career, even with all of the injuries that he's suffered through.
And, like, the period before he got hurt last year, he, like, solved basketball.
I know. He was, like, arguably the best player, even with Jokic playing at an insane level.
I mean, this is not an original thought, but watching him last year, it was like, okay, what if Kevin Durant was like the size of a Prius and
Yep.
like could move real fast. Like that was so, and that was like not that long ago.
No, it was this calendar year. He had 70 points against the Spurs.
God.
And now he looks like a husk of a human because his knee is just not being able to be stabilized anymore. But it is kind of perfectly representative of both his career and the process. That, like, the highs that you get mostly come in January. And the lows are just, like, so unexplainably low and weird. And like I said, the fact that we got 4 near MVP level seasons, if not MVP level seasons, all these all NBAs, all defense teams, and he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and he'll also probably be the best player that never made a conference finals. The only other one that's even sniffing his territory is Dominique Wilkins.
There you go. And Shadon Sharp was putting 55 on his head.
Exactly. Yeah, and Shaden Sharp will be the 3rd best player to never make a conference finals.
I think a kind of funny development that, like, because everything else is so insane, never gets talked about is them getting James Harden in the Ben Simmons trade, which is like a total coup, and then Harden playing 79 games before doing his 3rd trade request in as many seasons.
Amazing.
And then like kind of crushing it this year at age 79 for the Clippers.
Yeah, the way that I cope with that is that I always say, well, one, Daryl Morey, as good as he is at acquiring stars and drafting outside of the lottery, his biggest thing that he fucks up on is that he doesn't value role players at all. And what the Clippers did this year was the total opposite. The Clippers went out and they said, it's just going to be James Harden, Zubac, and a bunch of role players. And that's made them into a fairly competent team. Whereas if he were on the Sixers still, like, he would be on a max contract, so they would have had no cap space. Joel probably still gets injured. And if Joel gets injured, it's over. Like that's the thing that I keep coping through is, like, we could talk about the machinations of should they have signed Paul George? Should they have, built a deeper team? Should they have kept James Harden? Should they have done this and that? And then I'm like, well, if Joel Embiid is hurt, there's nothing that we can do. This whole thing is done. So until he's healthy, if that ever happens again, I'm not sweating all of the other moves. But the Harden thing is incredible because Harden's probably rewritten the story of his career 3 or 4 different times at this point. I mean, goes from Super Six Man to MVP level player to seen as playoff choker to having 2 of the best games. Funny enough, he had 2 of his best playoff games ever in one series with the Sixers in that Celtics series.
He was incredible. It was game 1 where he like basically won it by himself, right?
Uno. Yeah, we call it the Uno game. I had a clip that blew up online where I just screamed Uno because that's what Harden and his fans started calling him after he hit that shot. And that was on May 1st, which was Uno. And that was the best. We've lived through a lot of shit. That was the best performance that I've ever seen from a Sixers player in a playoff game. Like, he was unbelievable. But then the James Harden experience, and honestly part of the Joel Embiid experience too, is like that Game 7 is literally one of the most pathetic performances I've ever. Like, they just gave up. Like, it was like from the jump, those two were completely uninterested in that game, and we knew that it was over before it even began. And that is the thing, is that you're going to get these incredible high moments, and then you're going to have the lowest of possible lows.
That was the hardest I've ever rooted for a Sixers team. Like, I've been always fairly indifferent to actually liking them. But then, like, if they can defeat the dreaded Celtics, and then, like, I've always had a soft spot for Harden, too. And it's like, if Harden and Embiid can, like, resolve these, like, long-term points of tension in their career together, like, that would be so beautiful. And I think that does sort of, like, that's like where their current badness, not like where it stems from, but like I'm interested in, I was like going to watch their most recent game to prepare for this show. And then I just looked at like who played, and I was like, I feel like we kind of understand, like, if Embiid plays normally is the thing, then like it's all just sort of incidental what's happened. But like having watched him in his 4 games, like he doesn't seem to like want to like jump or like trust the knee in any way. So just like, how do you feel about the back 80% or 75% or whatever of the season that's to come?
I'm in full, like, I wish that they could just tank. I don't really think they'll have a hard time doing that. To be clear, this team stinks. But I wish that it's kind of complicated with this injury and surgery, though, because everyone's like, well, just shut down Joel for the year. And pretty much every doctor has come out and said that will do nothing. If anything, it might make it worse, because you basically, with this knee injury, everyone responds differently to the surgery. And someone like Joel, who's had a history of knee injuries, had the same meniscus injured, might never be the same. There's also a chance that he just needs to get back to a point where he can play games regularly, get into shape, trust the knee more, and the swelling and the pain that comes with this will go down over time. There's also a chance that he's going to be out for a month, and then he's back for 2 months, and then he's out for a month. Like, there's really no way to predict what's going to happen here. And like I said, I wish that they could go into, because they funny enough, OKC owns their pick next year. It is top 6 protected, but I'm kind of at the point where I wish that they could just be in that bottom 4, because it's most likely they're going to keep their pick if they're one of the 4 worst teams in the NBA, which, once again, I don't think they really have to change anything. This team is not good. They're going to play some of the younger guys now, which I think will make the team better, because all of the vets on this team became simultaneously washed at the same time, seemingly, which is not great for if you're trying to make the playoffs. But my whole thing is, like, I think they need to look at it like the way that we have built this team is that we need to get some sort of luck with Joel Embiid and his long-term health, but also with how we build this team and how we can create depth, because right now they have no outlets to bring in guys. Like, they could make trades, but, like, they really can only trade for 1 or 2 more guys. I think they need some sort of outlier draft luck to get, like, another guy in the draft, or get someone in the draft that is highly valued and flip him for another star or a high-level role player or whatever it is. Because at this point, they just don't have enough good like Maxey, McCain, Paul George, and Embiid. If Embiid can ever get healthy again, sure, that's a really nice team. But also, your 5 through 9 is going to change pretty much every year because of this new CBA. They're going to, like, Gershon Yabusele's been fantastic for us this year. We're not going to be able to keep him after this year, because the new CBA makes it so that you basically, it's so hard for these teams that spend a lot to even get access to their own MLE. And I think that they just need to hope that they get some draft luck, get one of these top prospects in the next draft, and start building the team a little bit differently. Because right now, it's just, it seems insane that coming into the season, I thought that they could possibly make it to, like, the conference finals or the finals, and now I think that they're one of the 7 or 8 worst teams in the NBA, and you can't just hand the 8th pick in the draft. Like, the upside of making the play-in, because I don't think they can make the top 6, the upside of making the play-in and either getting to the first round and getting destroyed or losing in the play-in is not worth losing the 8th pick in the draft to Oklahoma City.
Yeah, top 6 is a really, really narrow protection. Like, if you're going to reliably, like, try to go for that, you have to, like, there's no margin for error.
Yep.
Like, if you finish with, like, the 5th worst record, you're probably fucked.
You got to shut Jared McCain down. Like,
yeah,
shut, like,
unironically
down.
Well, I've said I think that this is kind of going to play out by itself for a few reasons. One is that there's really only 2 teams fully leaning into the tank right now, which are the Wizards and the Jazz.
Yeah.
Everyone else is, like, somewhat competitive because they're trying to keep their jobs.
The Blazers are awesome. Like,
the Blazers are very competitive. But also, on top of the reason why the Blazers are going to be competitive this year is because Cronin and Billups are probably feeling the heat a little bit, I would imagine. So they're not, like, the reason why they made, like, the Denny Avdia trade is because they want to try to compete right now. And then you look at the other teams and you go, okay, we're not going to be able to out-tank the Wizards or the Jazz. We might be able to out-tank pretty much everyone else. The Pelicans are going to be tough because they have all these injuries. But ultimately, if you have that top 6 protected pick, like, like I said, the young guys playing more will probably help just because it will be like an injection of energy and something new. But I think that, like, Paul George is probably going to sit out a ton of back-to-back still. If they don't have Paul George, like, it gets ugly quick. And Joel Embiid is certainly, like, he just got ruled out again for tomorrow's game. Like, he's going to be out. They're going to do, like, this rest schedule with him anyway. Like, I don't see there's any way that this team wins 35 games. Like, I think that they're somewhere in the I think they're somewhere in the 20 to 34 range. And yeah, that might be good enough to make the play-in, but like, what are your long-term goals? Because this could, handing over a top pick to a team like OKC when you really do have the option to go in the other direction and like potentially create something new out of this makes no sense to me. I see no upside with this team. Like there just really isn't. Like there aren't even like lineups that I can point to that are like, at least this lineup's doing good. Basically, there's only like one combination that works well, and it's Paul George and Maxey. And the reason why that is because we just destroyed the Pistons on the second half of a back-to-back without Cade Cunningham. So like
the only optimistic thing that has come out of the Sixers season is the like 7 clips of Jared McCain kind of looking like Steph.
Exactly. Yeah. And honestly, Jared McCain is to do this twice in 5 years with a guard outside of the lottery to get a guy who's very clearly going to be like in all-star conversations in the future probably is such a miraculous little thing that only happens to like the Celtics, that it has happened to us twice in 5 years and we still suck is just so appropriate. Like I always, the one thing I always point to is a few years ago in 2022, the Sixers and the Celtics both traded for defensive guards who could shoot and were like fairly capable offensive players. And one was DeAnthony Melton for the Sixers and one was Derek White for the Celtics. Derek White went to the Celtics and made one of the greatest mid-career shooting leaps in the history of the NBA and is now an all-star level player. And DeAnthony Melton might have to retire due to medical issues because of his knee and back issues after leaving the team and signing with the Warriors this year. But that's kind of the perfect encapsulation of how these two franchises have operated over the last decade.
You know, I do have to somewhat disagree with your premise there, Harry. I think this season has given us one of the best new Keith Pompey tweets.
Oh,
and Marcus Hayes' biggest moment.
Yep.
We've talked about Pompey. We're big fans of his. Every time I watch the Sixers, I think about this one tweet where he said the hashtag Sixers fans are chanting "Let's go Sixers." I think about 100 times per game. It's fucking great. So it's just anytime he becomes a larger character in the discourse, I fucking love it. And then to see Marcus Hayes get his shit punched is, I don't know. How did you feel about all that?
Well, first off, Keith is very important to the lore of Ball. He was basically the first moment that we had as a podcast was my screen recording of Keith back during the DirecTV.
That's tough.
9/11. Yeah, that
was
is
you,
tough.
right?
Yeah. I that was the first moment that I had on Twitter where like I remember people being like, "Yo, I was just listening to like a radio show I think it was Jim Norton's radio show, and they were talking about your tweet," and I was like, "What the fuck?" And like. And then we used that momentum to kind of build up some stuff on the podcast. And so Keith has always been near and dear to my heart and the heart of the Uniball podcast. So I appreciate him, but he is truly someone that can only exist in Philadelphia. I mean, it's insane to me that like to think about like the history of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Like when I was growing up, the writers for Philadelphia Inquirer about the Sixers were like Phil Jasner, who's like a local legend, and Stephen A. Smith covered the Sixers when I was a kid during the Iverson era. I don't know if you guys know the Tracy McGrady story, but the Sixers basically traded for Tracy McGrady, and Stephen A. Smith broke the story a day before it happened. And the Raptors were so pissed that it got leaked that they canceled the trade. So we could have had my two favorite players of all time on the Sixers when I was growing up, which breaks my heart to this day. But
that's amazing.
But to have Stephen A. Smith, who's like an icon,
right,
and literally revolutionized the media business, to then have them followed by Keith Pompey is just absolutely hilarious.
Well, he's revolutionized it in his own way. I mean,
exactly.
He's doing stuff on the with the Twitter fingers that you know he's doing like a performance art piece.
Yeah, he's a one-man revolution for sure. And then the Marcus Hayes thing, I mean, everyone loved to see him get his shit handed to him. He fucking sucks. I've always hated Marcus Hayes. He's a fucking loser. He's a boomer. And he doesn't deserve to be on television or have a column or get any respect from anyone. So that was a hilarious moment and well deserved from him.
It is just the the idea that like someone is like has that much power and also is so stupid that they can be like, oh, they're losing because of his dead brother.
Yeah.
But then like, I feel like we've lost recipes in the sense that like fewer and fewer of those like crank local newspaper columnists are like exist anymore. Like Sacramento kind of has one, but like the paper doesn't really exist. And like, it's sort of a throwback to like a stupider time, but it's weird that that's still going on in 2024. And I think could only happen in a place like Philly.
Yes.
I don't really know why.
It only could happen here because we have enough people that are invested in sports that they're still tapped into old media. Yeah. Like people like my dad's age will still like throw on the radio or watch Philadelphia Daily News like television shit like on Comcast Sportsnet here, or read the Inquirer on Sundays. Like there's not many markets left where there's such a passionate following amongst older people that are tapped into the sports world that they could still get away with it. But Philadelphia is definitely one of the few remaining, and I can't wait until all that shit dies out.
Like we have a staffer at our website who lives in DC who listens to Philly sports radio every single day.
Let's go.
There you go.
Because it's just, there's nothing like it.
It is truly, it's basically like looking into Arkham Asylum just for sports.
I remember, I was listening in like maybe it was a taxi or something to some sports radio, and like the take, this was like a year and a half ago, and the take was something like Emmanuel Quigley should be starting over Jalen Brunson. Like it's like they just are like on a different planet.
What are they cooking in their brain?
Exactly.
Like it's basically, I always say in the Discord, we always I think that there are people that are just like, you talked about like a natural born poster. There are natural born takesmen that have not been discovered yet, I think, that are amongst us. That I always joke that there was a few years ago, there was this girl named Trista Crick, I think her name was.
Oh yeah. I'm very familiar with her work.
And she went on a podcast and she talked about, I think she was with Barstool at the time. Yes. And she went on a podcast and she talked about like her like background and her story and stuff. And it was very funny listening to this. Like I grew up like a huge fan of hip hop. And it was like listening to like a struggle rapper in like 2008 like describe like their come up. Like
yeah.
Like she was like in the lab cooking up like horrendous takes and like trying to create something in her mind palace that will just like shock the masses. It's funny to think that like people are now aspiring take artists, if that makes any sense.
She's like an industry plant in the sense that she was basically primed for like the gambling industry to eat sports media, and like positioned herself extremely well to just like be a person who does front facing phone videos where there's nothing actually of value there, but like is presented in this way.
It is kind of a holdover from old media sports radio brain, but it definitely is. An industry plan is exactly how I remember when she first popped up being like, where did this person come from? Like I see her all the time now. I haven't seen her in quite some time, but industry plan is the perfect term to describe it. And it's funny that we're now getting that in sports media.
Yeah, right. I want to read one quick Keith Pompey banger that happened the other day. Oh boy, Andre Drummond has appeared to do serious damage to his right ankle after making a basketball.
No one's doing it like him.
No, he's cooking.
But
he's cooking.
No, maybe to end it, because you're bringing up all these undiscovered takesmiths. I think you're right. There are many of them, and a lot of them are Sixers anons. And something that has always inspired me about Sixers, and actually the Uno thing is really when I knew that Sixers Twitter was cooking something crazy up. Within like 4 days of James Harden being a Sixer or whatever, it was like, when will Uno respond? And 7 million people were liking and tweeting it.
Yeah,
so,
that
like,
was Chiodo. That's my buddy. He's always cooking on that.
How are they thinking of these things? Of the other one is there's some guy who just tweets Tyrese Maxey and it instantly gets like 150 likes.
Yeah.
What's your sense of what's going on there?
So I always say, like, one of the things that I've had to work through in therapy like unironically,
Sure.
is that I can't take things seriously at all. Like, I joke about everything. Like, that is my coping mechanism for if someone dies in my family, I'm making jokes.
Right.
Like, it gets to that point, and I think that is a Philadelphia. I'd imagine it's somewhat of the old waspy don't show your emotions or feelings thing, and everything at a certain point just becomes a bit. And Philadelphia is filled with a lot of people that are kind of the same background, where they basically just never take anything seriously. They're always fucking around, and everything at a certain point becomes a bit. The latest bit, not in Sixers world, but in Eagles world, is that ever since Nick Sirianni at practice, he shaved his head, and then he showed up to practice and they played Many Men by 50 Cent, and he just stood there with his hands behind his back looking like a mob boss. We haven't lost a game, so now we're the Many Men Eagles, and we're begging Sirianni to shave his head again. So those are the kind of things that are born out of, one, us just being bored and fucking around online all day, and two, just never being able to take anything seriously and making literally everything into a bit. So I think that is where all of these kind of, a lot of them is, Mike has started a lot of them. MHC 76, my buddy Mike Chiodo, has started a lot of them, but that's definitely the birthplace for most of the things that we've seen over the past few years.
And I guess the last thing I'll say is that it's like kind of this incredible, this Sixers season is this incredible apotheotic moment for like the process, for everything that was created in the wake of it, because you're now facing this like two true outcomes, mega tank or try to win a championship with a bad team. It's like, It's kind of incredible. Like, this is the perfect moment to reflect on all this, I think, because like the jokes are now real. Like everything is all come down to this like one season where it's like the trajectory is fucked and it's different. And like, I'm very interested to see more how it happens, but also how it's processed.
It's also perfect that we have a guy who, you talked about the two true outcomes. It's perfect that we have a guy who literally had a version of Moneyball named after him in Maury as our GM as well.
It's the last one of the things I keep circling around in this is this funny thing that the process is this hyper clinical kind of like data driven Moneyball style thing that you cannot help but think about as actually more of like a spiritual evangelical thing going on.
Yes.
Like, it makes me think about things like karma and like destiny and things of way more than it makes me think about tanking and winning and losing.
That's why I go insane when I see, like, I know you're a Warriors fan, right?
Yes.
I go insane when I see Warriors and Celtics fans acting. Celtics haven't done it as much recently because they're actually in the middle of their window right now, and they're kind of in. This is, winning the championship is our birthright as Celtics fans, and that if we don't win the championship, something has gone wrong has kind of always been their attitude.
Yes.
Warriors fans, I know that it probably was due to the fact that the team was overperforming earlier in the season, but the fact that they have mental breakdowns after every single loss.
That's awesome.
And there's always someone else to blame, instead of just realizing that, like, hey, this is kind of the natural way that things work in the NBA. You have your window. If anything, the Warriors probably got one extra title out of the window.
No doubt about it, yeah.
Considering how everything went, now if the 2021 and 2020 drafts went a little bit differently, you could make the argument that they would probably be a dynasty until Steph retires. But the way that those things went, to get that extra championship in 2022 and still have a pretty good team is like, it's just bonus points at this point if you're looking at the history of the way these things work. But instead, it has to become a blame game of the coach sucks, this player sucks, that player sucks, the reason why we aren't winning is because of this, instead of just realizing that this is just kind of how things work in the NBA. And as a Sixers fan, I've just kind of come to realize, like, this is just kind of how things work for us. We're not quite down as bad as the Nets, Pistons, and Hornets level of the world, but we'll probably always be in that middle group where we're not quite reaching the level of the championship, but we're always going to be kind of somewhere around the conversation. And I've kind of come to peace with that this season.
And you know what that is, that piece? That is the MK Ultra having its effect.
Yes, exactly. It
You're
works.
like, fuck it, dude. I don't know. Mike Pence, fucking, who cares? Whatever, they're blowing shit up over there. I don't give a fuck.
This is why I voted for Trump. Anyway, no, that's a joke. I want that on the record, please.
All right, I think that's all I got. Trill, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Please, for everybody, go listen to the You Know Ball podcast. It's excellent, very funny. Follow Trill on Twitter. Follow or on Blue Sky, wherever you may find
On both
him. And continue following Nothing But Respect in our journey toward maybe we'll be the next Rights to Ricky, the Rights to Ricky Sanchez of guys who lived in Brooklyn in their 20s.